After the fall of Thermopylae, Greece stood at the edge of despair. Cities that once celebrated freedom and pride found themselves staring into the darkness of Persian domination. Athens lay deserted, its people fleeing for their lives while invaders reduced their temples to ashes. Across the land, doubt spread like smoke. Many wondered if survival meant surrender, if resistance was nothing but a path to ruin. But in Sparta, the mood was different. The loss of Leonidas was not viewed as defeat. It was felt as a sacred obligation. His death ignited a promise inside the Spartan people, a promise that no spear, no army, and no king could erase. They refused to let Thermopylae become a final chapter. They chose to make it a beginning. As Greek allies argued, hesitated, and feared, Sparta stood unshakable, pulling the broken pieces of the Hellenic world back together. A new leader, Pausanias, stepped forward with the calm determination needed to guide an army toward one final confrontation. Step by step, the Greeks prepared themselves for the moment when all debts would be paid, all wounds remembered, and all fear cast aside. That moment waited at Plataea, where the Spartans intended to close the account written in blood at Thermopylae. How it possible? I will talk in story of those whose story, if you like, is like stories, then you have an option of subscribe, because we are bring these like stories. The aftermath of Thermopylae settled over Greece like a heavy smoke that refused to drift away. Every messenger who carried the news of Leonidas' final stand delivered it in a voice that trembled between pride and horror. The story of the 300 spread from village to village, city to city, landing like a stone in the stomach of every Greek who heard it. Some listened with awe, imagining the bravery of men who held back an empire. Others listened with dread, realizing that if Persia could overwhelm Sparta's finest, then no wall, no army, no city was safe. Mothers held their children closer. Fathers wondered if their homes, their crops, and their future would survive another season. Markets became quieter. Temples filled with prayers spoken in whispers. Greece sensed that a storm had not passed, it had only begun. Yet in Sparta, the grief was sharper, more personal, more explosive. Leonidas was not simply a king. He was the embodiment of Spartan identity. His death was not just a loss in battle. It was a challenge written in blood, a message carved into the heart of every Spartan. They saw in his fall a call that demanded an answer. Men who usually carried themselves with calm discipline now walked with a fierce intensity in their eyes. Silence hung over the city, but it was not the silence of fear, it was the silence of rage gathering strength. Even the youth felt it. Boys in the agoge trained with renewed ferocity, as if the news had carved a new purpose into their bones. Elders watched them with approval, knowing that the next generation would grow up shaped by the memory of Leonidas' sacrifice. Persia, meanwhile, believed the road to conquest had opened wide. Their armies surged across northern Greece, absorbing or crushing resistance along the way. Greek cities that once swore they would die before surrendering suddenly sent envoys with olive branches, desperate to secure their survival. Persian couriers rode between conquered towns carrying promises of safety to those who submitted quickly and threats of annihilation to those who hesitated. And through all of this, Xerxes himself was convinced that the Hellenic world would collapse like a weakened wall after one final push. He imagined himself returning to Persia with all of Greece under his rule, its people bowing, its kings kneeling, its future firmly locked in his empire's shadow. But Xerxes misjudged one thing. He believed Thermopylae had broken Spartan spirit. In truth, it had forged it into something far more dangerous. News spread that the Persians were approaching Athens. Word traveled fast, and the people of the city faced a choice that no proud Greek city ever wanted to make: stay and die, or abandon their homes to save their families. With their fleet still intact, they made the heartbreaking decision to flee. Thousands boarded ships, clutching children, sacred statues, and whatever belongings they could carry. A once thriving city emptied within days. Streets that echoed with philosophers' debates and merchants shouting fell silent as the last citizens pulled away from the shore, watching their beloved home recede into the distance. Persian soldiers soon marched into Athens, but they did not treat their conquest as a prize. They treated it as an example. They smashed altars, tore down statues, and set fire to the city. Flames climbed the columns of temples that had stood for centuries, licking the sky with orange fury. The Acropolis burned like a torch, visible even from the sea where Athenians watched helplessly, tears sliding down their faces as their heritage turned to ash. The message from Persia was unmistakable. This is what happens to those who defy us. But while Athens grieved, Sparta prepared. The Spartan council convened, each member carrying a tension that felt almost physical. Reports of Persian cavalry, archers, and infantry numbers filled the chamber, yet no one flinched. They listened, absorbed, and calculated. They had known this day would come ever since the first messenger reported that the Persian Empire was moving west. Every word spoken in the council carried the weight of their ancestors. Every decision was shadowed by the memory of Leonidas, whose absence filled the room more powerfully than any presence could. It was during these gatherings that Pausanias, the nephew of Leonidas, began to rise as a figure of unshakable composure. Tall, disciplined, and carrying a mind as sharp as a spear point, he studied Persia not as a monstrous force but as a flawed opponent. He saw their strengths clearly, but he also recognized that victory at Thermopylae had bred arrogance in their ranks. Arrogance, Pausanias understood, was always the crack in any great empire. He believed that if Greece could truly unite, then even Persia could bleed. But unity was easier spoken than achieved. Across the Peloponnese, Greek cities argued endlessly. Some wanted to negotiate with Persia, some wished only to protect their own land, and some resented the idea of following Spartan leadership. They feared the Persian cavalry, which moved with terrifying speed. They feared the archers who could darken the sky. They feared the sheer numbers Persia could send into battle. Many doubted whether a patchwork of rival cities could stand against the largest empire the world had ever seen. Yet all of them feared something else too. What would happen if they did nothing? Sparta used that fear, not as a threat but as a truth. Their envoys traveled to city after city, delivering messages not of desperation but of resolve. They reminded the Greeks that Thermopylae had proved something profound, that Persians could be slowed, could be wounded, could be resisted. The 300 had not died in vain. They had bought Greece time, and time was the most valuable ally of all. Slowly, city by city, the alliance began to rebuild. Tegea joined. Corinth pledged soldiers. Megara sent hoplites despite their dwindling supplies. Even reluctant states eventually realized that resistance was not merely possible, it was necessary. The Hellenic League started to take shape once more, rising from fear toward unity, driven by the unspoken belief that Leonidas' sacrifice demanded more than mourning, it demanded action. Amid this growing alliance, Sparta's message was clear: the next battle would not be fought in desperation, it would be fought in retribution. Inside Sparta's training grounds, the clatter of weapons filled the air day and night. Younger warriors trained with renewed ferocity, pushing past exhaustion, their muscles burning with determination. Veterans sharpened their blades and inspected their armor, running their fingers across every dent and scratch, remembering the battles that had brought them this far. Blacksmiths worked until their hands blistered, forging new spears, new shields, new armor plates. Women watched their husbands and sons prepare, their expressions a mixture of pride and sorrow. They knew what it meant to send a Spartan into war. They also knew what it meant to lose one, and as Sparta prepared, Persia prepared as well. Mardonius, the Persian general who remained in Greece after Xerxes retreated, understood the importance of eliminating Greek resistance once and for all. He was a formidable strategist, patient, intelligent, and ambitious. He knew the Greeks were gathering strength, but he believed Persia still held the advantage. His cavalry dominated open terrain, his archers outnumbered anything Greece could field. His infantry, though lighter, was vast and adaptable. He imagined crushing the alliance before it could fully form, delivering Greece into Persia's grasp like a trophy. But Mardonius underestimated the one thing Persia could not measure: the resolve born from loss. For the Spartans, Thermopylae was not history. It was a wound that would be healed only when the blood spilled there was answered on another battlefield. A battlefield where the Greeks would fight not as scattered cities, but as a single force united by destiny. that battlefield was waiting. Its name was Plataea,